Leadership can be a complicated subject, whether you're analyzing it from afar or handling it yourself. No matter what leader you are, you impact those around you with your choices and skills. Many times we don't understand the nature of that impact until long after leadership has come to an end. Many times, especially in video games, leadership will define entire factions instead of the other way around, and we see this many times over in the Warcraft universe. While we can wax poetic about the nature of cultural development due to leaders' personalities and choices all day, there's so much that we can definitively discuss about said impact, specifically with the Horde from the earliest histories before Warcraft 1. While much of the greater Warcraft community will always think of Thrall as the de facto Horde leader, today we set the clock back much further to see why the Horde is the beast it is today, thanks to two individuals from its distant past. Welcome to Ancient Lore, a discussion series where we peel back the layers of world building and story to examine, understand, and discuss where we came from in the World of Warcraft. Today's topic is how Guldan and Doomhammer shaped the modern Horde, and as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below or connect with me on my Discord. Before we begin in full, we'll set a few parameters. Lucky enough, the books that cover the pre-Warcraft 1 Horde are in general in agreement with the RTS lore, and while I won't be highlighting much of them in detail, we don't need to discount most novels for the purpose of today's exercise. In addition, we will be at least considering what was presented in the unreleased point-and-click Warcraft adventure game, even if it was never truly made canon in and of itself. Its goofy and often caricature-like representations of Thrall and Doomhammer live on in our hearts always. Chronologically speaking, the first single individual to have any kind of impact on the entirety of the Horde would be the Warlock Guldan, leader of the Shadow Council of Draenor. An immensely powerful fell spellcaster in his own right, Guldan used manipulation and cunning to take the Horde from a group of savage and shamanistic clans to brutal and demonically empowered warring factions, and then, finally through the manipulation of his puppet Blackhand the Destroyer, into a more organized and official singular entity. Let's break this down, because while we were able to condense that into a singular paragraph, it paraphrased a lot. Let's retake that first step, because before the Warlocks and specifically the Shadow Council reached out to kill Jaden and the Burning Legion, their influence was minimal. From what we understand, Fel magic only became a potent force after Guldan and his strongest warlocks were taught how to harness it from Kil'jaeden himself, and thus being instructed to pass these teachings on to others. This corrupting influence and how intensely powerful Fel magics were was impossible for many of the power-hungry orcs to pass up. Another potent act that Guldan committed at the manipulations of the Burning Legion was the bringing of many of the clan leaders together to embrace a greater rage and power by drinking the blood of the Pit Lord Manaroth. This intentionally leaned into the savage nature of the Orcish clans, brutal and strong fighters in their own right, fueling that nature and pushing it into a fury and brutality, a furnace that needed to be constantly fed lest it consume the clan. While this was a useful tool, even Guldan realized later on that the clans were beginning to destroy each other to feed the demon's corruption inside them, and thanks to the manipulations of the Burning Legion, eventually invaded Azeroth as part of a greater plan to keep the Horde from imploding. All this is to say, because of the actions of Guldan and the Shadow Council, the old ways of shamanism that the Orcish clans held onto for so long was nearly snuffed out. Only a few corners of the rare clans held onto them. That religious connection being severed did immense damage to the orcs as a culture and people, but because of the demon-fueled rage inside them, they didn't realize it at the time, only feeling the damage done after it burned out of their system. The lethargy that so much of the Horde experienced after the Second War was a direct result of this. Guldan's greatest lasting impact on the Horde is the regret, anger, and pain that almost every orc carries to this day. The other impact Guldan had was through his puppet Blackhand, when Guldan used him to bring the clans together as their first Warchief. Without that mantle, and setting the precedent of having a singular Warchief over all the clans, we may never have seen the level of organization that allowed the Horde to even function. While Blackhand may have been an ignorant brute in his own right, Guldan's actions through him permanently changed what the Orcish clans were, binding them into a singular entity that would become one of the most recognizable forces in all of video game history. Skipping anything else that Blackhand may have done, as by and large most of what he did as a leader was because of Guldan, we then and now take a look at the second individual of this piece, Orgrim Doomhammer. The Blackrock Lieutenant Orgrim Doomhammer was well respected amongst his peers and warriors, having served both on Draenor and in the First War to great effect. He had also always been suspicious of fell magics, their corrupting influence, and Guldan and Blackhand in general. When Guldan was sent into a magically induced coma while trying to commune with Medivh at the time of the Guardian's death, Doomhammer saw the opportunity to take leadership and steer the Orcish Horde back towards a place of honor. He earned the title Backstabber when he and his Wolf Riders destroyed Blackhand and assumed the mantle of Warchief. Doomhammer's time as Warchief was marked with steps in a very different direction. One of the very first things he declared was that fell magics were now forbidden, and made his point clear by slaughtering every single Orc Warlock he could find, including the Shadow Council itself. Guldan was spared, but that was it, and eventually the Warlock sacrificed his remaining Necrolites as well to create the original incarnation of Death Knights. In addition, Doomhammer pushed for greater tactical awareness and a stronger level of organization for the Horde. A newly established network of spies and scouts fed information to Horde leadership constantly, and lines of communication across the known world of Azeroth reached out to potential new allies across the board. For the first time ever, peoples other than orcs were part of the Horde. Trolls, ogres, and even goblins were integral to the war machine's continued functionality. While all of this may sound like just good leadership or even common sense, Orgrim Doomhammer did it without the influence of the Burning Legion. The transition was as subtle as it was vital, a shift in pitch rather than a complex changing of the notes. Instead of sightless rage and aggression, a structured, complex war machine echoing out of Blackrock's spire revealed itself. Our modern-day Horde, while not the same peoples, is a direct reflection of this change, with the Warchief having organizers and leaders under him, all turning the gears of war in specific and powerful ways. Certainly, Thrall learned much of these ways from Doomhammer in his time with him, and thanks to Thrall's efforts, shamanism was returned to the Horde. However, when it comes to the shape and structure of the Horde, it was Doomhammer's redefinition that took precedence in this reformation. Thrall did as well as he did because he stood on the shoulders of Doomhammer, the orc that truly defined what it meant to be a Warchief. In future episodes, we'll speak on fell magics, as well as light, shadow, arcane, and shamanism, and in particular my thoughts on the mechanics of each and how they function. In addition, we'll be taking time in a future episode to speak on other faction leadership and their impact, or sometimes lack thereof. We close this book of Warcraft history here and save the rest for another time. If you've enjoyed this feature, please consider subscribing here at youtube.com/theDanNation, as well as joining my Discord at tinyurl.com/Danscord. It's like Discord, but with 100% more Dan. Big thank you to Turtle Wow, where most of the visual footage you see during this episode was recorded at, as well as having provided the backing track for this piece. From the Lore Bunker in Boston, Massachusetts, this is Dan wishing you a wonderful and wide, wide world of lore.